I've delivered 400 babies in this town. I never imagined I'd need a DNA test to know if my daughter was one of them. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all started to unravel. A Tuesday afternoon in my clinic. The smell of antiseptic and old coffee hanging in the air. The sound of the waiting room television droning on about the upcoming Harvest Festival. September in Asheville, North Carolina, my hometown. The place where everybody knows everybody, where my grandfather opened this practice in 1954, where I've spent 16 years following in his footsteps. I was between patients, reviewing lab results at my desk, when Dolores Martinez knocked on my door. Dolores has been my head nurse for 12 years, maternal, efficient, the kind of person who can calm a screaming toddler with just her voice. But when she stepped into my office and closed the door behind her, her hands were shaking. "Dr. Sullivan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we have a problem." I looked up from the computer screen. "What's wrong?" She placed a manila folder on my desk. "The pharmacy called. They flagged a prescription for Xanax, controlled substance, written on your pad. But doctor, the patient listed is Rachel Holloway." She paused, met my eyes. "Rachel called me 30 minutes ago. She never had anxiety. She never requested this prescription. She's confused and honestly a little scared someone stole her identity." I felt my stomach drop. "That's impossible. Let me see." Dolores opened the folder. Inside was a photocopy of the prescription. My name printed at the top, my DEA number, the security watermark visible even in the copy. The handwriting wasn't mine. I could tell that immediately, but it was close. Someone had practiced. "I checked our supply," Dolores continued. "We're missing one pad from the locked cabinet, the pink triplicate forms for controlled substances." She hesitated. "Doctor, I hate to say this, but your wife has had access to that cabinet. She's picked you up for lunch. She's borrowed your keys for the house spare." The words hung in the air between us. Lisa, my wife of 20 years, the beloved AP English teacher at Asheville High, the woman who taught half the teenagers in this town about Shakespeare and essay structure, the woman who wore my grandmother's ring and sang in the church choir and organized the drama club fundraisers. "There has to be another explanation," I said, but even as I spoke, my mind was racing back through the past few months. Lisa asking to borrow my keys. Lisa offering to drop something off at the clinic. Lisa who'd seemed distracted, distant, her phone always face down on the table. "I hope so," Dolores said softly. "But doctor, this is prescription fraud. If the pharmacy reports it to the medical board, they'll investigate. They'll look at you first because it's your pad, your DEA number. I needed you to know." I stared at the photocopy, at the handwriting that almost looked like mine but wasn't, at Rachel Holloway's name typed in the patient field. Rachel, who taught 3rd grade at Asheville Elementary. Rachel, who was married to Matthew Holloway, the high school's athletic director and football coach. Rachel, whose daughter Claire was my Emma's best friend since kindergarten. Why would Lisa forge a prescription in Rachel Holloway's name? "Thank you, Dolores," I managed to say. Let me look into this. Don't say anything to anyone yet." She nodded and left, and I sat there in my grandfather's old office, surrounded by 4 generations of medical diplomas on the wall, holding evidence that my wife might be a criminal. I should have confronted Lisa immediately, but I didn't, because in a small town like Asheville, accusations spread faster than wildfire, and I couldn't risk being wrong. So I did what any fool in love does. I looked for proof that I was wrong. That Friday, I found proof that I was right. The Asheville High parent-teacher conferences were held in the school gymnasium, rows of folding tables where teachers sat waiting to discuss grades and behavior with anxious parents. Lisa was at her table near the back, wearing her favorite blue cardigan, her reading glasses perched on her nose, looking every bit the dedicated educator she'd always been. I wasn't there for a conference, Emma had graduated in May, valedictorian of her class, already starting her pre-med program at UNC Chapel Hill. But the school had asked me to set up a health screening booth for the community, blood pressure checks and flu shot information, part of my ongoing commitment to serve Asheville's families. I was packing up the booth, rolling up the blood pressure cuff, when I heard something hit the gymnasium floor with a sharp plastic clatter. I turned. A phone, not a smartphone, but one of those old Samsung flip phones from a decade ago, had fallen from Lisa's purse as she reached for a tissue. It skittered across the polished wood floor and came to rest near my foot. I picked it up. The screen was still lit from the impact. One new message from M. "Tonight, my place. R is working late." My hands went cold. I looked up. Lisa was staring at me, her face completely white, her mouth slightly open. For 3 seconds, we locked eyes across the gymnasium, and I watched my wife of 20 years realize that her secret phone had just betrayed her. "James," she started to say. But I was already walking out of the gymnasium, through the hallway lined with student artwork and trophy cases, past the principal's office, into the parking lot where the September evening air felt too thin to breathe. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes, the phone in my hand, before I finally opened it. 4,218 text messages, the oldest from 10 years ago, all from M, all to this hidden number. I didn't read them all, I couldn't stomach it, but I read enough. "Miss you already, can't wait for Friday." "Your husband doesn't deserve you." "That thing you did last night, God, Lisa." "Thinking about leaving my wife. For real this time." The messages painted a picture I didn't want to see. A decade-long affair, secret meetings during drama club events, and teacher conferences, and volunteer shifts at the town festivals. Pregnancy scares, there'd been one 7 years ago that ended with a message about taking care of it, that made my stomach turn. Plans to run away together that never materialized. Promises and passion and a complete betrayal of everything I thought our marriage was. And all of it with someone named M. Matthew. It had to be Matthew Holloway, the athletic director, the football coach the whole town worshipped because he'd taken our high school team to state championships 3 years running. The man whose wife's name Lisa had forged on that prescription. The man whose daughter was my Emma's best friend. I drove to Sheriff Tom Bradley's house without consciously deciding to. Tom and I have been friends since kindergarten. We played Little League together, went to prom with dates who were best friends, served as best men at each other's weddings. Tom knows me better than almost anyone in this world. When he opened his front door and saw my face, he immediately said, "Come in. Karen, can you give us a minute?" His wife disappeared into the kitchen, and Tom guided me to his study, closed the door, and waited. I handed him the phone. He spent 5 minutes scrolling, his jaw getting tighter with each swipe. Finally, he set the phone down on his desk with deliberate care. "How long have you known?" he asked. 3 days, since Dolores found the prescription fraud. This phone fell out of Lisa's purse tonight." "Jesus, James." Tom ran his hand over his face. "Do you know who M is?" "Matthew Holloway. It has to be." Tom nodded slowly. "I can verify that. Give me 24 hours. He paused. "I'm sorry, brother. I'm so damn sorry." "In Asheville, everybody knows everybody's business," I said, and my voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Except I didn't know my own. Tom reached across the desk and gripped my shoulder. "What do you need from me?" "The truth," I said. "All of it. Whatever you can find. Because if I'm going to blow up my life, my daughter's life, and this entire town's image of Lisa and Matthew, I need to be absolutely certain." Tom Bradley is nothing if not thorough. By Saturday evening, he'd pulled surveillance footage from Town Hall, the building where volunteer schedules are posted and where Lisa had signed up for booth duty at every harvest festival for the past 10 years. The footage showed Lisa and Matthew again and again slipping away from their respective booths during overlapping break times disappearing into the storage rooms, reappearing 15 or 20 minutes later with slightly disheveled clothes and guilty smiles. He'd requested old volunteer schedules from the town clerk. 47 events over 10 years where Lisa and Matthew's shifts mysteriously aligned. 47 times when they'd ensured they'd be in the same place at the same time, surrounded by crowds and community spirit, their affair hidden in plain sight. He'd even talked to the manager at the Mountain View Inn, just outside town. Yes, they'd had regular guests matching Lisa and Matthew's descriptions. Weekly visits for years, always separate rooms when they checked in, always one room empty in the morning. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and it was breaking my heart. But I still hadn't confronted Lisa directly. I was waiting for one more piece of the puzzle, the piece I was terrified to find. Emma came home from Chapel Hill that Sunday for dinner. My daughter, brilliant, kind, driven with my analytical mind and what I'd always thought was my stubborn chin. She looked tired from her first weeks of pre-med coursework, but her eyes lit up when she walked into the kitchen and saw me making her favorite pasta. "Dad, you didn't have to cook." "It's just carbonara. Besides, when do I get to see my pre-med genius?" She laughed and hugged me, and for a moment I let myself pretend everything was normal, that my world wasn't collapsing, that I wasn't about to ask my daughter a question I dreaded. Over dinner, I kept the conversation light, her classes, her roommate, the campus. But after we'd cleared the dishes and Lisa had excused herself to grade papers upstairs, Emma looked at me with concern. "Dad, are you okay? You seem off." This was my moment. I took a breath. "Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Have you ever noticed anything strange about your mother's behavior, particularly around Coach Holloway?" Emma's face went pale. She set down the dish towel. "Why are you asking me that?" "Please, honey, just answer the question." She was quiet for a long moment, then, in a small voice, "I've suspected for 2 years." The world tilted. "I didn't know for sure," Emma continued quickly. "I didn't have proof, but there were little things. The way Mom always volunteered for events when Coach Holloway would be there. How she'd check her phone constantly and smile at messages, and then hide the screen when anyone walked by. How she'd get defensive if I asked about her day. How she..." Emma's voice cracked. "How she seemed happier when she was away from us than when she was home." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was scared." Tears were running down her face now. "I was scared I was wrong. I was scared I was being paranoid. I was scared that if I told you and I was right, our family would fall apart. And I'm the good daughter, Dad. I'm the valedictorian who doesn't cause problems. How could I accuse my own mother of... I pulled her into a hug, and we stood there in the kitchen, both of us crying, the weight of 2 years of her secret and 3 days of my discovery crushing us both. "It's not your fault," I whispered. "None of this is your fault." When Emma finally pulled away, she wiped her eyes and said, "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but Emma, there's something else I need to tell you." I explained about the prescription fraud, about the phone, about the evidence Tom had gathered, and then, because I needed her to understand the full scope of what we were facing, I told her what I was planning to do next. "There's a DNA test," I said carefully. "Ancestry DNA. You wanted to order one for that college essay about our family's medical legacy, remember? About 4 generations of Sullivan doctors?" "Yeah, I mentioned that a few weeks ago for my anthropology class, but I haven't ordered it yet." "I need you to order it now. 2 kits, one for you, one for me." Emma's eyes widened as she understood. "Dad, no. You can't think. I don't know what to think anymore, honey. But if there's even a chance that..." I couldn't finish the sentence. "I need to know the truth, all of it." That night, Emma ordered the kits. Express shipping. They'd arrive in 2 days. And for those 2 days, I went through the motions of my life like a ghost. I saw patients at the clinic, my hands steady as I performed examinations, my voice calm as I explained diagnoses and prescribed medications. I smiled at the receptionist and joked with Dolores and reviewed lab results with the same analytical precision I'd always had. But inside, I was dying. Lisa and I barely spoke. She knew I had her phone. I'd kept it, told her I'd return it after I figured some things out. And the silence between us was louder than any argument. She slept in the guest room. I slept in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd missed 10 years of lies. I kept thinking about my grandfather's stethoscope, the one that hung in my office at the clinic. A 1960s Littman cardiology model with worn black tubing and a brass chest piece engraved with Dr. A. Sullivan serving Asheville since 1954. That stethoscope had listened to 4 generations of heartbeats. My grandfather had used it to deliver babies and diagnose heart conditions and comfort the dying. My father had carried it in his white coat pocket for 30 years. I'd been using it since I took over the practice in 2008. 4 generations, 70 years. Every baby in my family had heard their first heartbeat through that stethoscope. But what if Emma hadn't? What if the legacy I'd been so proud of was just another lie? The DNA kits arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. White boxes with green tree logos, test tubes with orange caps, prepaid mailers, instructions in 3 languages. Simple, clinical. The kind of thing thousands of families do for fun, to discover their ethnic heritage or find distant cousins, not to discover if their entire life was a fiction. I took the kits home. Emma was there, having driven up from Chapel Hill for the evening. We didn't speak as we opened the boxes, as we read the instructions, as we swabbed our cheeks and sealed the tubes and placed them in the mailers. "How long until the results?" Emma asked. 6 to 8 weeks for Ancestry DNA. But I ordered a clinical confirmation test too, the kind they use in court. That one's faster. 2 weeks. Emma nodded. She was pale, her hands trembling slightly. "Dad, what if the test shows you're not?" "Then I'm still your dad," I said firmly. "DNA doesn't change the fact that I was there for every fever, every nightmare, every bad day. It doesn't change that I taught you to ride a bike and helped you with calculus and drove you to soccer practice 1,000 times. Biology doesn't make a father. Being there does." She hugged me fiercely. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, honey." That night, after Emma had driven back to Chapel Hill, I sat alone in my clinic office long after everyone had gone home. The building was dark except for the light from my desk lamp. Silent except for the hum of the ventilation system. I opened the drawer where I kept my personal files and pulled out my own medical records I'd kept since Emma was born. Charts documenting her growth, her vaccinations, the times I'd treated her for strep throat and ear infections, and the broken wrist she'd gotten falling off the monkey bars in 3rd grade. And there in my handwriting from 18 years ago, blue ink on standard clinic paper, Emma Sullivan, born 7 LBS 2 Oz, healthy, looks just like me. Looks just like me. I'd been so certain, so confident. The shape of her nose, the way she squinted when she was thinking hard about something, her stubborn streak that I'd always attributed to inheriting my determination. But had I been seeing what was really there, or had I been seeing what I wanted to see? I closed the chart and looked up at my grandfather's stethoscope hanging on the wall. In the dim light, the brass seemed to glow with decades of memories and service. 4 generations, I whispered to the empty office. What happens when the chain breaks? The stethoscope didn't answer, but in 2 weeks a manila envelope would, and nothing would ever be the same. The clinical DNA test results arrived on a Thursday morning, 13 days after I'd mailed the samples. I recognized the envelope immediately. Thick manila, laboratory return address. The weight of it somehow heavier than it should have been. Dolores brought it to my office between patients. She didn't say anything, just placed it on my desk and squeezed my shoulder before leaving. She knew what it was. In a small town, secrets don't stay secret for long, and Dolores had watched me unravel over the past 2 weeks. I stared at that envelope for 3 hours. I saw 12 patients that morning, and somehow I managed to focus on their concerns. A child's persistent cough, an elderly man's blood pressure medication adjustment, a woman worried about her cholesterol. But the envelope sat there on my desk like a bomb, and every time I glanced at it, my chest tightened. At noon, I locked my office door. My hands were shaking as I opened the envelope, as I unfolded the official laboratory report with its graphs and percentages and clinical language. Alleged father James Alexander Sullivan, child Emma Claire Sullivan. Probability of paternity, 0%. Conclusion, James Alexander Sullivan is excluded as the biological father of Emma Claire Sullivan. 0.0. Not unlikely. Not low probability. 0. My daughter wasn't mine. I read it 3 times, hoping the words would change. They didn't. The report was coldly factual, listing the genetic markers they'd tested, the alleles that didn't match, the mathematical certainty of exclusion. I was still sitting there, the report in my hands, when my phone buzzed with an email notification. Ancestry DNA results were ready too. I pulled up the website on my computer, logged into Emma's account. We'd set it up together, both knowing what we might find, but still hoping we were wrong. The ethnicity results showed what I expected: Irish, English, German, a mix of Western European heritage that matched the Sullivan family tree. But it was the DNA relatives section that made my blood run cold. Close family, half-sibling, Claire Marie Holloway, 50% shared DNA. Emma and Claire were half-sisters. Not just best friends who'd grown up together, who'd had sleepovers and shared clothes and planned to be roommates in college someday. Biological half-sisters, same father, different mothers, which meant Matthew Holloway was Emma's biological father. My daughter and her best friend had been sisters for 18 years, and neither of them knew it. I don't remember much of the next few hours. I know I canceled my afternoon appointments. I know Dolores asked if I was okay, and I lied and said I was fine. I know I sat in my office as the sun moved across the floor and the shadows grew long, holding those 2 pieces of paper that had just rewritten my family's entire history. Around 6 p.m., my phone rang. Tom Bradley. James, we have a situation. Rachel Holloway is at the station. She's been here for an hour. She's asking for you. Rachel? Why? She knows about the affair. She's been investigating on her own for 2 years. She has evidence, James, a lot of it, and she wants to talk to you. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in Tom's office at the sheriff's station, and Rachel Holloway was sliding a 2-inch thick manila envelope across the desk toward me. Rachel looked exhausted. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands clutched a tissue, and when she spoke, her voice was flat with suppressed emotion. I hired a private investigator 18 months ago, she said. I'd suspected for longer, but I needed proof before I destroyed my kid's world. Before I lost everything. She gestured at the envelope. That's 2 years of surveillance. Motel receipts, 47 of them. Phone records. I got Matthew's old phone out of storage and had the data recovered. Text messages, photos, times, dates, locations, everything. I opened the envelope. The contents were devastating in their thoroughness. Receipts from the Mountain View Inn, dated and time-stamped, matching exactly with dates Lisa had told me she was at teacher conferences or drama club events. Credit card statements showing purchases at restaurants I'd never been to. A thick stack of printed text messages, some of them so explicit I had to look away. And photographs. The private investigator had captured Lisa and Matthew at the inn, getting into separate cars but arriving minutes apart, leaving together, kissing in the parking lot when they thought no one was watching. Why didn't you confront him? I asked. Because I was terrified, Rachel said, and her voice broke. Because Matthew is the town hero, the winning coach. Everyone loves him, and I'm just the elementary school teacher who married him. Who would believe me? Who would take my side? She wiped her eyes. But then Tom called me 3 days ago about the prescription fraud, about Lisa forging my name, and I realized, you know too. And together, maybe we can actually do something about this. I looked at Tom, who nodded. I had to tell her, James. The pharmacy was pressing charges. Rachel needed to know her identity had been compromised. I don't care about the prescription, Rachel said. I mean, I care, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because... She took a shaky breath. Because our spouses have been destroying our families for a decade, and we're the only two people in this town who can stop them. Together. I set down the photographs. Rachel, there's something else you need to know. Something the DNA test just revealed today. I told her about the paternity results, about Emma not being my biological daughter, about the ancestry DNA results showing Emma and Claire as half-sisters. Rachel went completely white. For a moment I thought she might pass out. Then she whispered, Claire is Emma's sister? They've been sisters this whole time? Half-sisters, yes, which means Matthew is Emma's father. Rachel's voice was hollow. Oh my God, oh my God. She stood up abruptly, paced to the window, came back. Claire and Emma have been inseparable since kindergarten. All those sleepovers, all those times they said they were basically sisters already. They were right. They just didn't know it was biology, not just friendship. The three of us sat in Tom's office, the weight of this revelation settling over us like a shroud. The Harvest Festival is in 9 days, Tom said finally. The town's 100th anniversary. You're both supposed to be honored. James as Grand Marshal, Lisa as Festival Queen. Every storefront in Asheville has posters with your faces on them. 40,000 people are expected to attend. Regional news is covering it. He paused. If this scandal breaks before the festival, it'll destroy the entire event. But if you wait until after, you're parading around town pretending everything's fine while you're both dying inside. I can't do that, I said. I can't stand next to Lisa and smile for cameras and act like she didn't spend a decade lying to me, like she didn't steal my daughter's true paternity from both of us. I can't either, Rachel added. But Tom's right. If we expose this now, we'll devastate the town. The festival committee has been planning this for 18 months. Local businesses depend on the tourism revenue. It's a $2.3 million economic impact. So what do we do? I asked. Tom leaned forward. You do what you should have done from the beginning. You confront them, Lisa and Matthew. You make them face what they've done, and then you let the legal system handle the rest. The divorce, the custody, if applicable, the consequences. But you control the narrative. You don't let gossip and rumor destroy you. You tell the truth on your terms. Rachel nodded slowly. I want to be there when you confront Lisa, and I want you there when I confront Matthew. Agreed, I said. We left the station together, Rachel and I, two people who'd been on the periphery of each other's lives for years. Polite hellos at school events, friendly waves across the grocery store, now bound together by shared betrayal and shared determination. In the parking lot, Rachel turned to me. James, I'm so sorry about Emma, about all of this. I'm sorry too, for both of us, for our kids. When are you going to tell Emma about the DNA results? Tonight. She deserves to know the truth, even if it destroys her. That night I drove to Chapel Hill. Emma was in her dorm studying when I texted that I needed to see her. She met me in the parking lot, her face already worried. Dad, what's wrong? I couldn't do this in a parking lot. We drove to a quiet coffee shop near campus, found a corner table away from the clusters of studying students, and I pulled out the DNA results. Emma read them in silence. I watched her face as understanding dawned, as her hands started to shake, as tears welled in her eyes. I'm not yours, she whispered. You are mine, I said firmly. Emma, listen to me. This paper says we don't share DNA, but DNA doesn't make a father. Being there does. And I have been there for every single day of your life. I taught you to ride a bike. I stayed up with you when you had nightmares. I helped you study for your SATs. I was there for your first day of kindergarten and your last day of high school and every single day in between. You are my daughter. This test doesn't change that. But Matthew Holloway is my biological father. She said it like she was testing the words, seeing if they felt real. Coach Holloway, Claire's dad. Yes, which brings me to the other thing. I pulled up the Ancestry DNA results on my phone. Emma, you and Claire, you're half-sisters, biologically. Emma stared at the screen, stared at me, looked back at the screen. Claire and I are sisters? Half-sisters, yes. We used to joke about that, Emma said, her voice distant. When we were little, we'd tell people we were sisters and our parents would laugh and correct us and we'd insist we were sister friends. We'd say we were basically the same person. A laugh that was almost a sob escaped her. We were right. We just didn't know. She was crying now, and I moved around the table to hold her. My daughter, because she was my daughter, blood or not, sobbed into my shoulder in a coffee shop full of strangers while our world continued to collapse. Does Claire know? Emma asked when she could speak again. Not yet. Rachel, Matthew's wife, just found out today. We're deciding how to handle this together. I can't tell Claire, Emma said. I can't be the one to destroy her life like this. You won't have to. Rachel and I will handle the parents. You and Claire, you focus on taking care of each other. How am I supposed to look at her knowing we're sisters? Knowing her dad is my dad, knowing my mom and her dad. Emma shuddered. It's too much. It's all too much. We sat there for a long time, holding each other while the world moved on around us, oblivious. The confrontation with Lisa happened 2 days later, on a Saturday morning. I texted her that we needed to talk, really talk, and to meet me at the house. Rachel was there too. I'd asked her to come because I wanted a witness, and because Lisa needed to see the face of the woman she'd wronged alongside me. Lisa arrived looking defensive, her arms crossed, her jaw set. When she saw Rachel sitting in our living room, her face went pale. What is this? Lisa asked. This is the reckoning, I said. Sit down. For the next 90 minutes, I laid it all out. The prescription fraud, the phone with 4,000 messages, the surveillance footage Tom had pulled, Rachel's evidence, the motel receipts, the photographs, the recovered text messages, the DNA results showing Emma wasn't mine, the revelation that Emma and Claire were half-sisters. With each piece of evidence, Lisa crumbled a little more. She tried to deny it at first, then to minimize it. It was just a few times. Then to blame me. You were never home, you chose your patients over me. And finally, when nothing else worked, she just broke down, crying. I never meant for it to go this far, she sobbed. It started as just excitement. Matthew made me feel young and wanted and exciting instead of like a pastor's wife who had to be perfect all the time. And then it became a habit, and then it became a need, and then I couldn't stop even when I wanted to. You stole 18 years from Emma, I said, my voice cold. You let her grow up thinking I was her biological father. You let her build her entire identity around being a Sullivan, around following in our family's medical legacy, and it was all a lie. She's still a Sullivan, Lisa protested. You raised her. You're her father. But Matthew is her biological father, and you never gave her the choice to know that. You never gave me the choice either. Rachel spoke up, her voice steady despite her tears. You forged a prescription in my name, Lisa. You committed identity theft and prescription fraud. You used James's medical license to break the law. That's criminal, not just immoral, criminal. Lisa turned to me, desperate. James, please. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can... No, I said simply. We can't. It's over, Lisa. Our marriage is over, and in 9 days the whole town is going to know why. Lisa's face hardened. You're going to humiliate me publicly at the Harvest Festival? James, that will destroy everything. My career, my reputation, the drama club kids who look up to me. You destroyed it yourself, I said. I'm just refusing to keep lying for you. After Lisa left, fleeing to her car in tears, Rachel and I sat in exhausted silence. That was brutal, Rachel said finally. It had to be done. Now we confront Matthew. The confrontation with Matthew happened the next day, and it was worse. We found him at football practice, surrounded by his team, 40 teenage boys who worshipped him, who'd won championships under his coaching, who saw him as a hero and father figure. Rachel, Tom, and I walked onto that field at 3 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon, and the practice ground to a halt. Matthew, we need to talk, Rachel said, her voice carrying across the field. Now. Matthew's face went from confusion to fear in seconds. He knew. Somehow he knew exactly why we were there. Rachel, this isn't the place. You made it the place when you spent 10 years lying to me, Rachel said. When you got James's wife pregnant with his daughter, except she wasn't his daughter, was she? She was yours. The football team was dead silent now, all 40 boys staring at their coach. Matthew's face turned red. We should discuss this privately. Like you and Lisa discussed your affair privately. I stepped forward. For 10 years? While I delivered other people's babies and never knew my daughter wasn't biologically mine. James, man, I'm sorry. Sorry? The word came out like a whip crack. You had an affair with my wife. You fathered my daughter. You let me raise her thinking she was mine. You watched me love her and teach her and build my whole life around being her father, and you never said a word. And then you did it again. You got Lisa pregnant again, and now there's going to be another baby, and you're just going to walk away. Matthew's face had gone from red to white. The team was murmuring now, confused and shocked. Tom stepped between us before I could do something stupid like punch Matthew in front of 40 witnesses. This is an active investigation, Tom said formally. Prescription fraud, identity theft, potential HIPAA violations. Coach Holloway, you'll need to come to the station for questioning. HIPAA violations? Matthew looked panicked now. Rachel pulled out a paper from her purse. Lisa's employment records, which she'd obtained through a public records request. Lisa accessed patient files inappropriately, including mine, including Emma's, including the school nurse's records. She used her position as a teacher to gain access to confidential information, probably looking for evidence about whether anyone suspected the affair. That's a HIPAA violation, Matthew, and you benefited from it. The head football coach, Matthew's assistant, stepped forward. Coach Holloway, maybe you should take a leave of absence until this is resolved. Matthew's entire world was crumbling in front of his team, and part of me, the dark, angry part, was glad. But another part of me, the part that had spent 16 years being a healer, felt sick. This was destroying everyone. Not just Lisa and Matthew, but Rachel and me, Emma and Claire, the team, the school, the town. In Asheville, everybody knows everybody's business. And now everybody was going to know this. The next 5 days were hell. The story spread through town like wildfire. Within 24 hours, everyone knew that Dr. Sullivan's wife had been having an affair with Coach Holloway. Within 48 hours, everyone knew about the DNA test and Emma's true paternity. Within 72 hours, the festival committee had called an emergency meeting to discuss whether to remove Lisa and Matthew from their honored positions. My clinic phone rang nonstop. Some calls were supportive, patients expressing sympathy, offering prayers, telling me they still trusted me. Other calls were less kind, people demanding to know if I'd known about the affair, if I'd been a negligent husband, if my medical judgment could be trusted when I'd been so blind at home. Dolores fielded most of them, her maternal instincts in full protective mode, but she couldn't shield me from everything. The worst was the gossip. In the grocery store, conversations would stop when I walked by. At the gas station, people would stare. At church, families would whisper and point. I was no longer Dr. Sullivan, the trusted family physician. I was Dr. Sullivan, the cuckold, the man who'd been deceived for a decade. And Emma, my Emma, was bearing the weight of it too. She'd come home from Chapel Hill, unable to face her dorm mates with the scandal exploding online. She stayed in her childhood bedroom, curtains drawn, while the town dissected her parentage and her mother's choices. On Tuesday night, 4 days before the festival, I found myself at the clinic at 4 a.m. I couldn't sleep, couldn't think, couldn't face another day of pitying looks and whispered gossip. I sat on the floor of my office, surrounded by patient charts I'd pulled from the files. 18 years of records. The Johnsons' twin girls I'd delivered during a snowstorm. Little Marcus Chen, who I'd treated for leukemia. He was in remission now, thriving. Sarah Mitchell's difficult pregnancy that I'd managed through 3 hospitalizations. Families I'd cared for, lives I'd touched, a career I'd built through compassion and dedication. But I couldn't save my own marriage. I couldn't even see what was happening in my own home. I was holding a chart, Emma's chart, the one with my note about her looking just like me at birth, when Tom found me. He must have gotten a call from the alarm company when I'd entered the building at 3 a.m. He stood in the doorway of my office looking at me sitting on the floor in the dark, and his face was full of grief. "James, talk to me." "I've treated 8,500 patients in this town," I said, my voice hollow. "I've saved lives. I've delivered babies. I've held people's hands while they died, but I couldn't see what was happening in my own home. How can anyone trust me when I was that blind?" Tom came into the room, closed the door, and sat on the floor beside me. We'd been friends for 38 years. We'd survived everything together. Little league strikeouts, high school heartbreaks, college stress, wedding joys, life's complications, and now this. "You saw what you were supposed to see," Tom said, "because you're a good man who trusts people. That's not a weakness, James. That's why this town needs you." "I don't know if I can stay here. Everyone knows. Everyone's talking. Every time I walk into a room, I'm not Dr. Sullivan anymore. I'm the guy whose wife had a decade-long affair with the football coach." "You're right. Everyone knows." Tom gripped my shoulder. "But you know what else everyone knows? That you're the doctor who stayed up all night with the Peterson kid when he had meningitis. That you treated half the uninsured families in this county for free. That you drove through a blizzard to deliver Rachel Martinez's baby when she went into labor early. This town knows who you are, James. One scandal doesn't erase 16 years of service." I wanted to believe him, but sitting there in the dark, surrounded by the evidence of my life's work, all I could feel was the weight of failure. "Emma is devastated," I said. "She won't come out of her room. She won't talk to Claire, her sister, because she doesn't know how. She's 18 years old, and her whole identity just imploded, and I can't fix it. I can't fix any of this." "You're not supposed to fix it alone," Tom said. "That's why I'm here. That's why Rachel is there. That's why this whole town, despite the gossip, is actually rallying around you. You just can't see it yet through the pain." We sat there on the floor until dawn started to lighten the windows. 2 middle-aged men, one a doctor and one a sheriff, both trying to figure out how to survive the wreckage of broken trust. When the sun finally came up, Tom stood and offered me his hand. "Come on, we have work to do. The festival committee meeting is tonight. You need to decide whether you're still going to be Grand Marshal on Saturday." I let him pull me to my feet. "I don't know if I can face them." "You can, because you're James Sullivan, 4th-generation Asheville doctor, the man who delivered 400 babies in this town." 400 babies, The number that had once filled me with pride now felt like an accusation, because I'd needed a DNA test to know if my daughter was one of them. But Tom was right about one thing. I couldn't hide anymore. In 3 days, the 100th Harvest Festival would happen, with or without me. And I needed to decide whether I'd face it with dignity or let Lisa and Matthew's betrayal destroy everything I'd built. That night, I made my decision. The Asheville Town Council chambers were packed that Wednesday night. Every seat filled, people standing along the walls, the air thick with tension and the murmur of conversations that stopped abruptly when I walked in. The festival committee sat at the front table, 12 community members who'd spent 18 months planning the 100th Harvest Festival. Mayor Patricia Chen was at the center, flanked by the festival organizers, the tourism director, and several business owners whose livelihoods depended on the event's success. Mayor Chen called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss the situation involving this year's Grand Marshal and Festival Queen designees. Dr. Sullivan, Mrs. Sullivan, would you both like to speak? Lisa wasn't there. She'd moved out of our house 3 days ago, staying with her father 2 hours away in Charlotte. She'd sent a resignation letter to the committee, withdrawing from all festival activities. The drama club at school was being advised by a substitute teacher. Lisa Marie Sullivan, beloved educator, had simply disappeared from Asheville. I stood, every eye in the room fixed on me. I'm still here, I said. I know what people are saying. I know the gossip, the speculation, the judgment. But I want to be clear about something. I did nothing wrong. My wife had an affair. She lied to me for 10 years. She committed prescription fraud using my medical license. She let me raise a daughter thinking she was my biological child when she wasn't. Those are facts, not rumors. The room was dead silent. But Emma is still my daughter. DNA doesn't make a father, showing up does. And I showed up every single day for 18 years. I was there for her first steps and her first day of school and her high school graduation. That doesn't change because of a DNA test. I paused, looking around at faces I'd known for decades, families I'd treated, people I'd lived alongside my entire life. If you want me to step down as Grand Marshal, I'll understand. This scandal isn't what you wanted for your 100th celebration, but if you'll have me, I'd like to serve in that role. Not as the perfect family man you thought I was, but as someone who's been broken and is choosing to stand back up. Because that's what Asheville has always been about, resilience and truth and community. Mayor Chen looked at the committee members. Discussion? Tom Bradley stood. He was on the committee as sheriff. Dr. Sullivan has served this community for 16 years with integrity and compassion. What happened in his marriage is personal, not professional. I move that he remains Grand Marshal. Second, said Dolores Martinez, also on the committee. The vote was 9-3. I would be Grand Marshal. As I left the chambers, people approached me, some to offer support, others to satisfy their curiosity, a few to express judgment. But I'd made my stand. I was staying. The legal consequences came swiftly after that. On Thursday morning, the Asheville High School Board met in emergency session. I wasn't there. Rachel was, representing herself, but Tom called me afterward with the results. 7-2 vote to terminate Lesa's employment, effective immediately, he said. Moral turpitude clause in her contract. The prescription fraud was the deciding factor. They couldn't keep an educator who'd committed identity theft. And Matthew? Administrative leave pending investigation. The board is split. Half want him gone, half want to protect the football program. They're trying to figure out how to handle it without destroying the team's season. He should resign, I said. He won't. He's lawyered up. But James, there's more. The medical board called. They've closed their investigation into you. You're cleared of any wrongdoing related to the prescription fraud. They determined Lisa acted alone, forging your signature without your knowledge or consent. I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief, maybe. or just the absence of one more weight. Thank you for pushing that through. That's what friends do. On Thursday afternoon, I met with Rachel Morrison, the divorce attorney Tom had recommended. Rachel, the lawyer, not Holloway, was in her late 30s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with a reputation for aggressive advocacy. North Carolina allows fault-based divorce for adultery, she explained, spreading papers across her desk. Given the evidence, the text messages, the motel receipts, the DNA proof, this is straightforward. You file citing adultery. Lisa won't contest it because she can't. The question is asset division and any custody considerations. Emma is 18. She's an adult. She can choose where she lives. Good. Property? The house is in both our names. I'll buy her out. Alimony? I'll offer minimal support for 6 months. After that, she's on her own. Rachel, the lawyer, smiled grimly. You're being generous. Given the circumstances, you could argue for no alimony. I just want it over. The papers were filed that afternoon. Lisa would be served within 48 hours. That evening, I drove to Chapel Hill to see Emma. She'd been avoiding my calls, texting only brief responses. When I knocked on her dorm room door, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes, hair uncombed, wearing sweatpants, and one of my old medical school t-shirts. Hey, honey. Hey, Dad. She let me in. Her roommate was gone, the room quiet except for the hum of the mini fridge. We sat on her bed and I told her everything. The committee vote, Lisa's termination, Matthew's administrative leave, the divorce filing, the legal consequences that were just beginning to unfold. Emma listened in silence, her face unreadable. When I finished, she said, Have you talked to Claire? No, that's between Rachel and her family. Have you? She texted me yesterday. She knows. About us being sisters. About everything. Emma's voice cracked. She said she doesn't know how to feel. That part of her is happy because we've always been like sisters anyway. But part of her hates it because it means her dad is a cheater and a liar and my biological father, which makes everything weird and complicated. How did you respond? I told her that I love her, that she's my sister, my real sister, not just my friend, and that didn't change just because we found out the truth, that we get to decide what our relationship means, not our parents. That's exactly right. Emma looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Dad, I don't know who I am anymore. My whole life I've been Emma Sullivan, the fourth-generation doctor's daughter, the girl who was going to follow in your footsteps, carry on the family legacy, but I'm not a Sullivan, not by blood. I'm a Holloway. And I don't know what that means. I pulled her close. You are Emma Sullivan. You're my daughter. You're brilliant and kind and stubborn and everything I could have hoped for in a child. The fact that we don't share DNA doesn't change that you've been mine since the day you were born. You don't have to carry on any legacy except the one you choose for yourself. But your grandfather's stethoscope, she whispered, the one you were going to give me when I finished medical school. 4 generations, 70 years, I'm not part of that lineage. I thought about that stethoscope hanging in my office, symbol of everything I'd believed about family and legacy and the weight of tradition. Emma, do you know why I became a doctor? She pulled back, wiped her eyes. Because Grandpa was a doctor and his father before him. That's part of it. But the real reason is that when I was 10 years old, I saw my grandfather save a woman's life. She'd had a heart attack at the grocery store, and he was there, and he knew exactly what to do. And afterwards, she hugged him and said, You gave me more time with my grandchildren. That's when I knew. Being a doctor isn't about bloodlines. It's about showing up when people need you. I took her hands. You've been showing up, Emma. You've been volunteering at the clinic since you were 14. You held that baby while I stitched up his mother's hand. You comforted Mrs. Peterson when her husband died. You chose medicine not because of DNA, but because you have the heart for it. That's what makes you a Sullivan. Not genetics, choice. Emma cried into my shoulder, and I held her the way I'd held her 1,000 times before, when she'd fallen off her bike, when she'd been heartbroken over her first crush, when she'd been stressed about college applications. Biology hadn't made these moments real. Love had. I'm still going to medical school, she said finally. I know you are, and you're going to be brilliant. And I'm still your daughter. Always. We stayed in her dorm room for another hour, talking about everything and nothing, about her classes and her roommate and the research opportunities she was considering, normal things, life continuing despite the chaos. As I was leaving, Emma said, "Dad, are you really going to be Grand Marshal on Saturday?" Yes. Even though everyone will be staring and whispering, especially because they'll be staring and whispering, because I have nothing to be ashamed of and I'm not going to hide. She smiled, small but real. Can I come? I want to be there with you. Emma, you don't have to. I want to. You're my dad, and I'm proud of you. That nearly broke me. But I held it together, hugged her one more time, and drove back to Asheville with something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect autumn weather for a festival. By 9 a.m., Main Street was already packed with vendors setting up booths, musicians tuning instruments, families arriving early for the best parking spots. I stood in my bathroom staring at myself in the mirror as I adjusted my tie. The Grand Marshal was supposed to wear formal attire for the parade, suit and tie, dignified and professional. I looked at my reflection and saw a 43-year-old man who'd aged 5 years in 2 weeks. But I also saw someone who'd survived, someone who was still standing. Emma had driven up from Chapel Hill early. She met me at the house, wearing a dress and her grandmother's necklace, her hair pulled back, makeup carefully applied to hide the sleepless nights. "You clean up nice," I said. "You too, old man." We drove to the festival grounds together. As we walked from the parking area toward the staging zone, people turned to stare. Whispers followed us like a wave, but Emma held my hand and we kept walking. The parade coordinator rushed over. "Dr. Sullivan, we're so glad you're here. You'll be in the lead car with Mayor Chen. The parade starts at 10:30, runs down Main Street to the town square, where you'll give a brief speech. 5 minutes maximum." I didn't prepare anything. "That's fine. Just thank everyone for coming, acknowledge the town's history, keep it positive." 5 minutes to summarize 100 years of history and 2 weeks of personal hell. No pressure. At 10:15, I climbed into the back of a vintage convertible, a 1965 Mustang cherry red borrowed from the car club. Mayor Chen sat beside me. Emma had been given a seat in the second car with the festival committee. As we waited for the parade to start, I looked down Main Street. 40,000 people, maybe more, lining the sidewalks. Families with children on shoulders, teenagers clustered in groups, elderly residents in lawn chairs, tourists with cameras, the entire town and half the region, all gathered to celebrate Asheville's centennial. And there, along the route, I saw them. Tom and his wife, Karen, holding a sign that said, "We love Dr. Sullivan." Dolores Martinez with a group from the clinic, all wearing matching t-shirts with the Sullivan Family Medical Center logo. Rachel Holloway standing with her daughter, Claire, both of them waving when they saw me. Patients I'd treated, families I'd known for years, people I'd delivered as babies, now holding babies of their own. The parade began. As we rolled down Main Street, the cheers were deafening. People called my name, children waved. And yes, some people stared with judgment or curiosity, but overwhelmingly, the response was support. We reached the town square, and I climbed out of the convertible to approach the podium. The square was packed. 15,000 people at least, with overflow crowds watching on screens set up throughout the festival grounds. Mayor Chen introduced me briefly, then stepped aside. I gripped the podium and looked out at the sea of faces. Emma was in the front row, right where I could see her. Tom stood beside her, Rachel and Claire on the other side. My support system, visible and strong. I thought about the speech I should give, the safe, sanitized version about community and tradition and celebration. Instead, I told the truth. I've lived in Asheville for 43 years. I began. I was born in the hospital on Grove Street. I went to kindergarten at Asheville Elementary. I graduated from Asheville High. I went away for college and medical school, but I came back because this is home, because in Asheville, everybody knows everybody. I paused, let that sink in. And for the past 2 weeks, everybody has known my business. They've known about my wife's affair, about the DNA test that revealed my daughter isn't my biological child, about the prescription fraud and the scandal and the complete implosion of what everyone thought was a perfect family. The crowd was utterly silent now. I could stand here and pretend none of that happened. I could give you a nice speech about tradition and community values and our town's bright future, but that would be a lie, and I'm done with lies. Emma was crying, so was Dolores, so were a lot of people. The truth is, I've been broken these past 2 weeks. I've questioned everything, my judgment, my worth, my ability to be the doctor this town needs. I sat in my clinic at 4 a.m. wondering if I should just leave Asheville and start over somewhere nobody knew my shame. I looked directly at Tom, but my best friend found me on that floor and reminded me who I am, not who I thought I was, but who I've actually been all along. A doctor who shows up, a father who loves his daughter, a man who can survive betrayal and still choose truth. I turned to Emma, and my daughter, because she is my daughter, DNA be damned. She chose me back. She chose to be here today. She chose to stand beside me when it would have been so much easier to hide. The crowd was starting to respond now, murmurs of agreement, scattered applause building. I've delivered 400 babies in this town, I said, and there it was. The motif I'd carried through all of this, transformed now by everything I'd learned. For years, I thought that made me part of Asheville's legacy, part of a tradition going back 70 years, 4 generations of Sullivan doctors serving this community. I took a breath. But I learned something these past 2 weeks. Family isn't about biology. It's not about blood or DNA or genetic inheritance. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses you, and who you choose back. I looked at Emma, then at the crowd. My daughter taught me that. She's not my biological child, but she's mine in every way that matters. Because I was there for her first steps and her first day of school and every single day in between, and she was there for me when my world fell apart. The applause started then, growing louder. Emma was openly sobbing, and so was I. This festival celebrates 100 years of Asheville history, I continued. 100 years of families and community and people showing up for each other, not because we're perfect, we're not. Not because we're all related by blood, we're not. But because we choose each other. We choose to stay. We choose to build something together. I gripped the podium, my voice breaking. I'm standing here today not as the perfect doctor with the perfect family. I'm standing here as someone who got knocked down and had to learn how to get back up. And the reason I could do that is because this community, flawed and gossipy and complicated as it is, caught me. You caught me. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that. The crowd erupted. Standing ovation, cheers. Tom was hugging Emma. Dolores was dabbing her eyes. Rachel Holloway was applauding, tears streaming down her face. I stepped back from the podium, overwhelmed, and Mayor Chen took over, thanking me and transitioning into the rest of the program, but I barely heard it. I was making my way off the stage, and Emma met me at the bottom of the steps. We held each other while the town cheered around us. "You did it, Dad," she whispered. "You told the truth." "We did it," I corrected. "Together." The rest of the festival passed in a blur of handshakes and hugs and conversations. People approached me all day, some to share their own stories of betrayal and survival, others to thank me for my honesty, a few to offer unsolicited advice about moving forward, but overwhelmingly the response was support. Late in the afternoon, as the festival was winding down, I found myself at the medical tent I'd been volunteering at every year for the past 16 years. This year, I wasn't on duty. Someone else was covering it, but I stopped by anyway, drawn to the familiar. Emma was with me. She'd stayed by my side all day, my constant companion and support. "Dr. Sullivan?" A voice behind me. I turned. Rachel Holloway stood there with Claire. Both mother and daughter looked nervous, but determined. "Rachel, Claire." "We wanted to thank you," Rachel said, "for what you said in your speech about chosen family." She glanced at Claire, then at Emma. "The girls have been talking, and, well, maybe it's time they talk together, if that's okay." Emma and Claire looked at each other, these two young women who'd been best friends their entire lives and were now discovering they were sisters. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Claire said, "I'm still mad at my dad and your mom for what they did to our families." "Me too," Emma said, "but I'm not mad at you. You didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you." "So," Claire took a tentative step forward. "Sisters?" Emma's face crumpled. "Sisters." They hugged and both started crying, and Rachel and I stepped back to give them space. "How are you holding up?" I asked Rachel quietly. "Matthew moved out yesterday. I filed for divorce this morning. The girls don't know yet. We're waiting until after the festival." She paused. "How about you?" "Lisa's already gone. Papers are filed. I'm buying her out of the house." "Good." We stood there in companionable silence, two people who'd been brought together by shared betrayal and were finding unexpected friendship in the aftermath. "The baby," I said. "Have you heard?" "Lisa's 14 weeks along. She's going through with the pregnancy, but she's arranging a private adoption. Matthew signed papers yesterday relinquishing parental rights. She called me to let me know. Professional courtesy, I guess." "That's the right choice. The baby deserves a fresh start with people who actually want him." "Agreed." 2 weeks ago, I would have been devastated by the news of Lisa's pregnancy with another man's child. Now I just felt resigned, sad for the baby who'd be born into complicated circumstances, but hopeful that adoption would give him the stable, honest family he deserved. As the sun began to set, Emma and I walked back to the parking area. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages, some supportive, a few critical, many just curious. But one stood out from Dolores. "Boss, the clinic has had 17 new patient registration requests today. People watched your speech. They want you as their doctor. You're not losing this town, you're gaining it back." I showed Emma the message. She smiled. "See? You're still Dr. Sullivan. You're still the town hero. You just had to be human first." That night, after the festival crowds had dispersed and the vendors had packed up and the Main Street decorations had been taken down, I drove Emma back to her dorm in Chapel Hill. We didn't talk much on the drive. We didn't need to. The day had said everything. As she got out of the car, she turned back. "Dad, thank you for fighting for us, for not giving up. Thank you for being my daughter, for choosing me. Always." I drove back to Asheville alone, through the mountain roads I'd known my whole life, past landmarks and memories and the evidence of a life lived in one place. When I got home, to the house that was mine now, not ours, I went straight to my home office. On the shelf, in a place of honor, sat my grandfather's stethoscope. I'd brought it home from the clinic earlier in the week, needing it close during the worst of the crisis. I picked it up, felt the familiar weight of the brass chest piece, the worn texture of the old rubber tubing. 70 years of service. 4 generations of Sullivan doctors using this tool to listen to hearts and lungs and the fundamental rhythms of life. I'd been so afraid that Emma's DNA revelation meant the legacy was broken, that she wasn't a real Sullivan and therefore couldn't inherit this symbol of our family's dedication to medicine. But I understood now. The legacy wasn't about DNA. It was about showing up, about choosing to serve, about using your skills and compassion to help people, regardless of whether they were related to you by blood. Emma was more of a Sullivan than I'd ever given her credit for, not because of genetics, but because she'd chosen to follow in the footsteps of service and healing. That was the legacy that mattered. I pulled out my phone and texted her, "The stethoscope is yours. When you finish medical school, I'm giving it to you officially because you earned it, not through DNA, but through every choice you've made to be a healer. Love, Dad." Her response came 3 minutes later. "I'll take care of it. I'll make you proud. And when I have a daughter someday, I'll tell her about her grandfather, the man who taught me that family is about showing up. Love you, Dad." I sat in my office holding that 70-year-old stethoscope, and I cried. Not from sadness this time, but from gratitude for Emma, for Tom, for Dolores and Rachel, and everyone who'd caught me when I fell, for a town that could be judgmental and gossipy, but was also capable of profound compassion. 3 months later, on a December afternoon, I received a call from the adoption agency. Lisa's baby had been born, a healthy boy, 8 pounds 4 ounces. The adoptive parents were a couple from Portland, Oregon, far from Asheville's complicated history. They'd named him Owen. They'd sent a photo. I looked at that photo for a long time. This child who was connected to my story, but not part of my life. Who would grow up in a different family with different traditions, building his own legacy. I said a prayer for him, for Owen, for his new parents, for the fresh start they all deserved. Then I filed the photo away and closed that chapter. 6 months after the festival, Emma came home for summer break. She'd completed her first year of pre-med with honors. She'd made new friends, joined study groups, begun volunteering at the university hospital. She was thriving. On her first day back, she came to the clinic. Dolores hugged her immediately. The entire staff gathered around to congratulate her on her grades and hear about her year. And then Emma said, "Dad, can I shadow you today? Like old times?" We spent the day together, me teaching her the way my father had taught me, the way his father had taught him. The difference was that this time I wasn't teaching her because she was a Sullivan by blood. I was teaching her because she'd chosen this path, and I'd chosen to support her. At the end of the day, I took my grandfather's stethoscope from its place on my desk. "Here, use this one today." Emma's eyes widened. "Dad, you said when I finish medical school, I changed my mind. Use it now. Start building your own memories with it, because that's what legacy really is. Not preserving the past, but creating the future." She took the stethoscope with trembling hands, placed it around her neck, and looked at me with tears in her eyes. "How does it feel?" I asked. "Like home," she whispered, "like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." That night, I updated my will. The house, the practice, the medical equipment, everything would go to Emma eventually. Not because she was my biological daughter, but because she was my daughter in every way that mattered. Because she'd chosen me, and I'd chosen her back. And that choice was stronger than any genetic bond could ever be. In Asheville, everybody knows everybody. And now everybody knew my story, the scandal, the betrayal, the DNA revelation, the public confrontation. But they also knew the rest of it. The part about resilience and truth and chosen family. The part about standing back up after being knocked down. The part about a father and daughter who refused to let biology define their relationship. I've delivered 400 babies in this town. I thought that defined my legacy, the continuation of a medical tradition, the pride of following in my ancestors' footsteps, the weight of genetic inheritance. But I know now family isn't about delivery rooms. It's not about whose DNA you carry or whose blood runs through your veins. Family is about who shows up every day after, who chooses you when they could walk away, who stands beside you when the world is watching and judging, who loves you not because they have to, but because they want to. Emma is my daughter, not because a test says so, but because we chose each other. Every single day for 18 years, and every single day for the rest of our lives. That's the legacy I'm leaving. Not genetics, not bloodlines, but love and truth. And the unshakable knowledge that the families we build are just as real, maybe more real than the ones we're born into. In Asheville, everybody knows everybody. And now everybody knows this. Dr. James Sullivan delivered 400 babies and learned that the most important delivery wasn't any of them. It was showing up to be a father every single day for a daughter who was always meant to be mine.